Namaskar. In this episode of Dil Se, we're going to talk about India and China. And as we all know, that China now is a very powerful country, economically, politically. It's also a very important country, and of course, China is our neighbor, so we can't do without China. And actually, with the string of pearls policy of the Chinese, they're trying to surround us. But if you look back in the history of our relations, India and China went through several phases. And the first phase was from 1947 to 1960, when our relationship was pretty good. Why? Because we were facing the brunt of the colonial power. We became free, and we respected each other, and we were, in fact, collaborating with each other in several ways. And of course, then Hindi Chini Bhai Bhai slogan. The problem started in 1959, because by that time the Chinese had annexed Tibet. And when we gave asylum to the Dalai Lama, the problem started from there, and we entered the second phase of our relationship between 1960 to 1980. And a lot of things happened during that time. We had the 1962 war, which we lost. And we had several other conflicts. China became closer to Pakistan, helped Pakistan. We had the 1965 war, and we had the skirmish in Nathula in 1967. Actually, that's where we actually won the war with the Chinese in Nathula. And then, of course, 1971, we became very close with Russia. We entered into a treaty with Russia. So we've had some problems during that period. Then the third phase was 1980 onwards. And then, of course, you had the visit of Rajiv Gandhi to China, which actually thawed the relationship, in a sense improved it. And then came Narsimha Rao's government and economic liberalization. The economic relationship started, and that sort of brought us close to China. And this phase continued for a while, till 2013. When really problems started. Of course, as you know, Aksai Chin has been occupied by China now at one time, and this was way back in our maps. We showed Aksai Chin as part of Indian territory, we still show it. But at that time, there was a road that went through it and created tensions. And now, of course, came Galwan, and we lost 20-odd soldiers. And this, actually, the relationship has gotten from bad to worse since that time. And now it is said that even though the Chinese have occupied our territories, there seems to be, they say, they are moving back and restoring the status quo of 2020. We're going to discuss all this and where we stand with China and what the relationship is going to be in the future with three enormously knowledgeable people, I would say, people who know this backward, such India-Chinese relationship backward. And we have first of all, thank you, Doc. Subramanian Swamy, who is here with us. And what can I say about Subramanian Swamy? He's a maverick. He is a great economist. And he has brought about tectonic shifts in Indian politics as and when he has assumed the role of a troublemaker. He's a Harvard doctorate in economics. And he was a Minister of Commerce in Chandrasekhar's government. He had a very important role to play even in Narsimha Rao's government. Yes, he's 6 times member of parliament, thrice in the Lok Sabha, and thrice in the Rajya Sabha. And you know, he has a lot to say about the Chinese, and he doesn't quite agree with the position that the present government is taking on China. So thank you very much, Doc, for being here. Shiv Shankar, most people don't know, his great-grandfather was the president of the Indian National Congress in 1897, right? The first Keralite, the only Keralite to be the president of the Indian National Congress. And his father was ambassador to Yugoslavia, his grandfather, foreign secretary, his uncle was a 15th foreign secretary, so, you know, his lineage, you know, in his understanding of foreign policy and foreign relations. And he's been in the neighborhood, really, in the sense after Israel, you were ambassador to Sri Lanka, ambassador to Pakistan, and then, of course, China. And you were the NSA during UPA government till 2014. Yeah? and you were the foreign secretary. So you were completely familiar with this area, and I'm sure you will throw a lot of light on the issue. Thanks very much. You have Ashok. He's here with me. He was also served as ambassador to China, right?
Yes.
And Ashok also was, I think, Secretary East Asia, right? So you're also familiar with this area. You write a lot on subjects. You appear on television channels also, and you're very familiar with the Indo-Chinese relationship. You're also, I think, chair of the Chinese Studies?
I was director there, Institute of Chinese Studies.
Institute of Chinese Studies. So you're also extremely familiar with the issue. So let me start with you, Doc. What's happening?
That's the toughest question you can ask me. I'm also a bit surprised because it's all happened when in the beginning he said, "Koi aaya nahi, koi gaya nahi." That is, there was no interventions of the Chinese.
Mm-hmm.
Now he has done what I would call as a somersault and said they will negotiate. And negotiate from what point? I mean, this is not made very clear. I've just seen Shiv Shankar's statements. They are a little confusing, but I don't think they have worked out very clearly how the negotiations are going to take place. Mm-hmm. So what I would say this thing is that the Chinese had put a lot of blockades. They have not removed any of them. Mm-hmm. There are 6 blockades, major blockades they put where we couldn't be allowed to cross. They have taken advantage of that mountain which is near Pangong Lake, that big mountain called...
Just a simple question.
Yeah.
How much of our territory have they occupied, according to you?
According to me, if you take only Ladakh and Arunachal together, I would say they have got 25%.
25% of our territory.
That's why I've done my calculations. I'll send it to you.
But the Prime Minister has said that no part of Indian territory has been occupied.
Yeah, he says koi aaya nahi, koi gaya nahi till the other day. Now he is saying that yes, aaya hai, but kuch nahi liya hai. That sort of thing.
But this happened, of course, after Galwan when 20 of us...
No, I'm talking about the entire period. You
Okay,
see,
okay.
They during Modi's, during Jawaharlal Nehru's time also they came and occupied.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
They got this part of Kashmir. They put that road, and we could do nothing about it.
And they're now building a lot of infrastructure on the
Yeah,
other side.
they are. It's absolutely. I think it's a very, very serious matter which is they are trying to hide. And what intrigues me is this was the ideal time to have a relationship with the Americans. Mm-hmm. But we are having exactly the opposite. Mm. We have terrible relations just now with the Americans.
I know, all the Five Eye countries.
That's right,
not
the five
just
ones,
the Americans, right?
That's right.
And now recently they've made some very, very serious allegations against...
That's right.
Right.
And the Chinese, and the Americans and the Chinese have very good talking relationship. So
I don't think they can do without each other, if you ask.
Yeah, that's probably more accurate. But the fact is that we are completely, even the people who were there in Pakistan, this recent meeting, was in Pakistan, right?
Yes.
And they told I know one journalist who's very close to me, whose name I won't give, who was representing the Hindu paper in that conference. So from her I heard, so I put also that
that's
she's a
certainly
she.
not hearsay.
So I got the impression that Xi Jinping was very cold to him.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Oh, Kazan.
Yeah, in that place.
Mm-hmm.
And he has made a proposal that he wanted to improve relations.
Right.
And the Russians, of course, pushing that along. And there's no concession they have given at all. I mean, there's none. You ask, has the Foreign Secretary told the press exactly what is the position after koi aaya nahi, koi gaya nahi? What is actually the places where they've occupied it, you see. So this Pangong Lake onwards, we have an airport in.
Yes, but that's very, very strategic for us.
Yeah, I'm told that I've told by a military man whom I met 2 days ago that we are a little worried about that because the Chinese have got their eye in it. And Pangong Lake, they were nowhere. This all has happened the last 4 or 5 years.
But Shankar, they have occupied around 3,488 kilometers.
Square kilometers.
Square kilometers, Aksai Chin.
That's when you say total Aksai Chin.
Total Aksai Chin.
That is from the 50s onwards, and during the war in 62, they took an extra 2,500, so that includes.
Right, and they are now eyeing 90,000 square kilometers in Arunachal.
In Arunachal Pradesh.
Right.
And,
right? And so you've been, both foreign secretary and, of course, dealing with these issues for a long time. Where do you think, how can we resolve this whole problem, according to you, and where is this relationship going? I'm sorry, it's a tough question, but...
I wish I had the silver bullet, a magic solution. No, I think the problem is, it's not a technical problem. Everybody now knows the lie of the land, knows which bits are important. We fought wars there, so we know which. Yeah. So both sides know. The question is the political will to settle it.
Okay.
Whether there is or isn't, and whether there is political will on either side to tell your own people that, look, you have to change the way you learn to draw the map of your own country in school. That's a nice big political ask, to say that for any politician, you have to be able to show some concomitant gain at least. And neither side has come to that simultaneously so far.
If I remember correctly.
There have been times when we've been ready, when they've been ready. If you look at the history, the 70 years, you've had a series of missed opportunities when one side or the other was willing to see.
Nehru was told by Chou En-lai, we'll accept the McMahon line.
He said, we'll be realistic in your where you are holding it. You accept what we are holding.
And Nehru said, I can't do a bargain with you on this. I remember.
Said, we can't swap.
No,
and Nehru then told him, look, opinion in India, as you said, after 59, after the Dalai Lama, Tibetan refugees, after China, which had kept quiet on the boundary and said, we have no territorial dispute. Suddenly in January 59, Chou's letter said, we have these huge claims, and the whole boundary is disputed. So everyone in India felt betrayed. So Nehru actually sent him to each of the ministers to explain to him that, look, my cabinet, I can't get this through. Chou En-lai thought if this had happened in Peking, it would have been a setup, right? Yeah. So Chou En-lai thought when each minister gave him a lecture that he was being insulted and so I think from that point on, that opportunity went. But you had other opportunities. In 70, Mao smiled. Mrs. Gandhi was very keen, actually, in the 60s. And again, 3 days after signing the treaty with the Soviet Union in 71, she writes a note to Huxley saying, shouldn't we offer the same thing to the Chinese? Which shows how pragmatic she was in the way she looked at these things. Of course, Huxley wrote 6 pages back saying, why not? But so, for me, it's a history of missed opportunities. But ultimately, it's a political will on both sides. And at what stage will both sides feel that?
Isn't it better for both sides?
We came close, I think, in Rajiv Gandhi's time because our economies were the same size. We were at similar levels of integration with the world economy. Even in terms of technology, there wasn't much to choose between us. Today, the balance of power is very different between us. So you can see the way the Chinese behave is very different again. When they feel the balance is in their favor. You saw what they did in Galwan in the Western sector. Right. So I'm not sure that, so frankly, if you ask me, is a settlement imminent? I wouldn't think so. But you need to find some way of living with China's a fact of life.
But this statement of theirs now, the government statement that, status quo has been restored, what does that mean?
Actually, the army chief is careful in what he says. He says, we hope to restore the status quo.
Yes, correct.
So this is an agreement so far that we know only for joint patrolling or coordinated patrolling in 2 areas, in Depsang and Demchok. Right. We have no idea where. We have no idea whether it's all on our side of the line or where the Chinese are going. Are we legitimizing their Chinese presence on our side of the line, which they respected before? We have no idea. So I think we need to be a little careful before we overinterpret this. This is maybe a way of politically opening the door to a dialogue. But then we need to use that dialogue for something. And I think we need to be reasonable in today's situation in terms of what we're looking at. If you can stabilize the situation, good. But to look for a settlement of the boundary, which has eluded us for 70 years.
Look, you've had so many joint sort of...
And I think we know the problem well enough. I mean, frankly, during the special representatives' talks, we'd set ourselves a three-stage process. First, we said we'd do general principles, and which we did. In 2005, we signed an agreement when Wenjapa came.
Yes.
Then we'd do a framework for a settlement, and then finally reduce the framework to a line on the map and the ground demarcated, and have a boundary. Yeah. We've done most of the framework. We know exactly where the problems are. Today, it's a question of a political decision on both sides, saying, let's do this. But whether either side is willing to take the political pain of, because there has to be give and take, right? It can't be only one-sided.
Absolutely.
And how do you sell that politically? I'm not sure that governments today on either side are ready.
After him, I would like to say something about give and take.
Sure.
So
fine, and then I'll go to Ambassador Kantha.
Just hear him.
Where do you think we stand in the light of what your friends have said?
There are different issues. One issue is trying to sort out the mess that was created in the aftermath of Chinese transgressions into Eastern Ladakh in summer of 2020.
Yeah.
That was very different from earlier standoff situations. I think we need to take cognizance of that.
Was it different?
Earlier standoff situations, like he was involved with working out the standoff in Depsang in 2013.
Yes.
And essentially, we could persuade the Chinese side to go back, restore status quo ante. I was involved with the disengagement in Demchok and Chumar in 2014. And brief given to me was very simple. Restore status quo ante as of 1st September 2014. I just didn't discuss anything at all. I kept repeating that and they agreed actually. And we had an agreement in writing on that. This time what happened that they had amassed a fairly large body of troops opposite Eastern Ladakh. We apparently misread their strategic intention. We thought it was a routine military exercise, and because of COVID, we didn't have the mirror exercise on our side, which we normally do. And they pivoted and they transgressed into multiple areas on our side, the line of actual control. And this situation, we started sorting it out in June. You're aware of what happened on the night of 15th, 16th June in Galwan Valley. But between June 2020 and September 2022, we could work out disengagement in Galwan Valley, Gogra Hot Spring area, and Pangkung Lake area. But with a serious caveat from our side, they involved buffer zones. That means our troops could not go to patrolling points they were visiting earlier. Our graziers could not go to pastures they were using earlier. And they were largely on our side of the line of actual control. So there was it was meant to be, we thought, a temporary expedient, but this is not being reopened now. Foreign Secretary has clarified that under the latest understanding, it has not been reopened. As Mr. Menon mentioned, what was announced on 21st October is limited to 2 pockets only, Depsang Plains and Demchok.
Right.
Facts are not fully known. Hopefully, we'll be allowed to go up to, there are 5 patrolling points beyond what we call Y junction or bottleneck. And in Demchok area, we'll be able to go up to Chadingnala, Nilungnala junction, which we traditionally did. But this will be part of coordinated patrolling. So it's a new, sort of concept we have introduced. How deep Chinese will come, what will be restrictions on the patrolling, all that is not known. So first thing which is required, that there must be greater transparency, greater visibility about what has been agreed, number one. Number two, what was agreed upon in other pockets, Galwan Valley, Gogra Hot Spring and Pankung Lake, that's not the final solution, because that involves basically loss of territory for us. And as long as that arrangement stands, there is no restoration status quo ante. That's why, as Mr. Menon mentioned, Army Chief, if you look at his public lecture on 22nd October, is very clear that you require restoration of trust. Then we'll have process of disengagement, a de-escalation and de-induction. So it's going to be a complicated process. Once disengagement is carried out, you have to pull back troops, which is again going to be a difficult proposition. My point is that you can't refer to normalcy being restored in border areas until disengagement has been carried out to our satisfaction, which involves restoration status quo ante. And the state of militarization of border has been resolved. So it's a long way off.
Okay.
Only after that we can start talking about relations returning to the normal track. I think Dr. Jaishankar is very clear that the state of borders will determine state of relations. As long as borders are abnormal, we cannot have normalcy in relations.
Sure.
Going by that, it's going to take time.
You were going to say something?
See, one is that you have made up your mind that you want to settle with China. My view is that there has to be a decision taken that we are a force which is equal to China, and that if we can't today fight them and throw them out, we should prepare for that. And we should choose associates, countries which want to join with you in dealing with China without them getting into the picture.
Okay.
So I'm suggesting a totally different
You're hinting at the United States and strengthening
United
our
States
relationship.
and their allies.
Okay.
And it's not that I'm talking out of the hat. I have discussed the matter. I was recently in the US. I had discussions with them. I know a lot of people there. I am of the view that they will not like to fight for us. Obviously, they are not going to do Afghanistan for us.
No.
But we are capable of defeating China, because China has to come a very long way across the Tibetan frontier to come and meet us on our ground.
But
If
at
you're
the
not
moment, they have an
prepared-
advantage in the sense that they are sitting pretty out there across the border.
No, that's not. They have to cross a border, cross the hills, and then come and sit on our border.
But they are at a higher.
They are, but
yes.
I'm saying that makes it very difficult for
makes
them to
difficult for
retain
them to,
it.
Yes, correct,
Yes.
correct.
provided you
But
are
they have
well,
at the
well
moment
informed.
a strategic advantage, is what
Yes.
I'm saying.
Yeah. I'm saying that there are countries which will be ready to, and you after all formed a quad. Why did you wind it up de facto? It's been wound up. Why did we make it, and why did we undo it? My personal feeling is that from what I know, the Prime Minister is a little afraid of China. Otherwise, he wouldn't have said "Koi aaya hi nahi." He should have taken that as an
No,
example.
but he can't be afraid because he's the one who said that laan laakh dikhani chahiye.
No, Lan gayi in South India, but not in
I see.
not to the Chinese. You see,
I see.
you see. When one lady officer told us that these people have come in 2020,
Yes.
it was poo-pooed, and I think she was in fact shifted out or something like that.
Right.
But the fact is that it was so. He said, "Koi nahi aaya." Na koi aaya, na koi gaya. That's what he said. That was a lie. So we are dealing with the psychology of the Chinese. I will say that I've been to China many, many times.
So is he. So has been when he was chief minister, 13,
Who?
12, 13 times.
No, that's a different kind of visit.
Okay.
Mine was a scholarly visit.
Okay,
His
all
was-
right.
he went for rest and recuperation.
I see. Okay.
And Jai Shankar knows all about that. He was the ambassador.
I see. But we don't want you to reveal those secrets on our
No,
program.
I'm not on
That's
it.
for certain. Anyway, Shankar, just two issues which I think people really won't understand. Is there an actual line of control? That's number one, right? And how do you define a line of control? People wouldn't know. I think lay people listening to this program will not understand. Number one. Number two, when you say status quo, is it status quo after they had entered Indian territory, right? And they are going to remain in the Indian territory, right? Or is it status quo before they entered Indian territory? So the two issues I'd just like you to throw some light on.
About the LAC, there is no agreed line of actual control which we both drawn on a map and both said this is the line. But in most places, we know the limits that we patrol and the limits that they patrol. We know where we go. And there are about 16 areas where we clearly have different perceptions, where we both go. Or we think he's coming across on our side, he thinks we're going across. And those areas have been fairly clearly identified. So the armies know on both sides. And the governments know on both sides which the areas are. But if you say where's the actual precise line, there's no such thing as an agreed or delimited line.
In a border as huge as ours, it's impossible to have a line, right?
It is. And in fact, in some ways, that works for us. What you were saying, you have the capacity to embarrass the Chinese just as they can embarrass you.
Right.
After all, why are you saying that nobody came? Because you don't want to be embarrassed politically. But you can embarrass him.
Right.
Also, this is a very long border.
Right.
In 2010, we raised 2 additional mountain divisions. In 2013, we raised a whole mountain strike corps. Because we saw this coming. We saw what was happening on the Chinese side. So, you know, I'm not such a pessimist that, oh, the balance is terrible, that we can't handle this. I think we know how to handle it. It takes some determination, it'll take some time.
So what you're saying is that the entire border is not manned by the army. There are pockets in the border, and we know as to where they are and where we are.
And we establish presence by coming and going to show our control of these areas. But you know, these are uninhabited, up most of it above 18,000 feet above sea level, and terrible, I mean, in terms of climate and so on. It's really...
What about the other issue now?
Now, the
status quo
about
issue.
the status quo. When we say status quo, we mean status quo before they moved forward.
Right.
And that's what we've always said, status quo as of April, because the movements, we assume, were in May. But that's not what I notice. There is ambiguity. People start saying status quo anti, but anti what?
Yes.
I mean, it's a transitive.
True.
You know, you need some object at the end of that sentence.
But neither the Chinese nor the Indian side
the
have...
Chinese never say status quo because they're the ones who moved forward. They're very happy where they are. So they say, no, let's establish peace as we are. We'll do de-induction, we'll do de-escalation, build buffer zones. It's all happening on your side. So they're quite happy to do this. And over time, if you keep doing this, it amounts to really salami slicing.
Right.
A little bit by bit by bit. I mean, you know, Ben-Gurion was asked once in the 50s, what is Israel's land policy? He said, we take it inch by inch.
So, literally.
So, I mean, that's the risk here when you, A, don't have a defined LAC, and B, if you're vague about what you mean by status quo and which status quo, and if you don't show the will or the capacity to actually enforce your own claims.
Ashok, let me ask you.
Just on this point about status quo, you know, Army Chief has been very categorical more than once. And this speaking in public functions, I referred to his remarks on 27 October. He stated clearly we want the status quo to be restored as of April 2020. April 2020 because this is when Chinese amassed troops and they made these multiple transgressions across the line of actual control. As far as LAC is concerned, I think Mr. Menon is absolutely right. You know, both sides have very clear understanding of where LAC lies. There are pockets where we have overlapping patrolling. Overlapping patrolling has gone on for a long time. That's why if you look at when we're negotiating, like CBM protocol of 2005, we have a separate provision on what happens when patrols come face to face.
Right.
We agreed on it, on detailed modalities, how they disengage, go back to their respective bases. Problem is that they would like to make a creeping acquisition inch by inch of what Ben Gurion said here. It's little more than inch by inch, but they are doing it, and this is a part of a larger policy China is pursuing. What is sometimes referred to as grey zone warfare. They're doing in South China Sea very successfully. They're doing in East China Sea, in Senkaku Tiayu area. They're doing in Taiwan Strait, and they're doing it along India-China borders, where they keep changing facts to the ground incrementally, but staying in the threshold of outright military conflict. And it becomes difficult to deal with them. I don't know, again, point he made, when it comes to deterring China, it's not that we can't do that. We are not, it's not a question of their defense budget being 4 times larger than us. It's basically boils down to what kind of forces you can bring, muster and bring to bear upon the line of actual control. And in certain areas, we have advantage. For instance, the fact that our airfields are at lower altitudes. So there are advantages, not that it's...
But in this area, do they have a strategic advantage by being there upon...
yes, I mean, that's why when we assess what happened on 21st October, apparently up to 5 o'clock in the morning they were negotiating. There was one area where, if indeed we have been allowed to go back to 5 patrolling points beyond bottleneck, that's a significant gain. Because Chinese wanted to block us, because that also provides a sort of ingress route towards Aksai chain. You have G219, which is coming up, which is there. They are building another highway parallel to that. They wanted to retain that advantage. That was a significant advantage. If there is overlapping patrolling or coordinated patrolling, to some extent that advantage they had gained is negated.
Okay. But if you look at it from an overall...
Yes, and the other thing is it's very important, which we need to know. We need to know, is there a quid pro quo? If they agreed to allow us to resume patrolling to our traditional patrolling points in Depsang Plains and Demchok, there are media reports suggesting that they have been allowed patrolling in Yangtze and Asafila area.
That's right.
Now, Yangtze is one area...
We've never allowed that to happen.
No, we are militarily well entrenched.
That's right.
They, according to reports available in public domain, in December 2022, they tried to actually a very large body of PLA troops came, and they were foiled.
People don't know where Yangtze is.
Well,
so
Yangtze is
it's
in
Arunachal. That's the other side.
Yeah, not far from Tawang.
Yeah,
actually,
not far from Tawang, where we had a lot of problems. But anyway, so people don't know listening to this program.
But if those concessions are made, I think that's serious concession, and we need to know about it.
Yeah, but nobody is telling us, and I think it's the duty of the establishment to tell us exactly what the understanding of this relationship, of this so-called, agreement is.
Yeah.
And if they don't do that, then people like us will speculate, and it's not good for the country.
May I add 2 things?
Yes.
There were 2 times when the Chinese, their own internal literature, confessed amongst themselves. Nebu is something which is for their internal circulation. One is in 1967, when they on that hill of Sikkim.
Yes. Natullah.
We sent them,
Yes, we sent them
packing.
back. And we have a strategic advantage there.
Absolutely, and it was great valor on the part of our people also, and that they were able to push them off.
Right.
Second thing is during Rajiv Gandhi's time, there was a Sumdu-Rum Valley thing. There also they got a beating, and it had an impact in China. I met Deng Xiaoping in 1981. And at that time he said to us that you also have become very strong, we are also very strong, why should we fight? The Americans will watch it with glee. So that position has changed quite a lot. I think they now feel that there are only two major world powers, one is America and one is China.
They're not wrong, Doc.
As of now, not wrong. Yes. But why should we allow that to be so?
Yes, I agree with you. I mean, if your per capita income is $3,000 and their per capita income is
theirs is
12.
What is
12.
there? No,
Right.
let's say on Chinese GDP, please, I've written books on it.
Yeah, but there are lots of problems with Indian GDP also, no?
Yeah, there is, but nothing as absurd as theirs, you see.
You know, they're blocking our water resources, they are building big dams.
I'm not on the present thing. I'm not very popular with them anyway. So I'm saying basically, well, we do have our figures sent to the World Bank and the United Nations Statistical Office, and some degree of our ability to take it apart.
At some stage, you were in charge of some statistical office, no?
Yes,
He's the one who did the first national income estimate.
That's
right.
Saying. Therefore, you know a lot about that.
Yes.
Right?
In fact, Deng Xiaoping specially invited me because I was able to give him the number.
So these statistics are a matter of great controversy in India.
Yeah, of course they are. but
where do we stand economically? $85 billion deficit.
Right.
And
in fact, it's getting worse. You know, the 5 years before 2020, there was about $21 billion worth of Chinese investment into India. And there was some hope of reducing the deficit if Chinese manufactured in India and we started exporting out of, and we built some manufacturing here to balance it out. But after 2020, of course, that stopped. I mean, we stopped investment and so on.
Didn't like that.
And now you've gotten to work yourself into a position where it's very hard to see how you can deal with that deficit, because China is critical to your economy in many crucial sectors: automobile parts, APIs for pharmaceuticals. You look at electronics. You know, it's in fact something like almost close to 40% of your manufactured imports originally come from China.
Correct.
And this is
their average export over the last many years is 9%.
So you've got yourself into a position where actually you have the same problem as the Americans. You are structurally, economically linked to China.
Right.
And you will do damage to both of yourselves if you try and decouple. So you can de-risk, but you can't decouple. But you have huge issues on the political side. As he said, as the Foreign Minister says rightly, you can't have a normal relationship if the boundary situation, if the border situation is not normalized. And so we have this dilemma where so to that extent, what happened this October so-called agreement, Chinese have never called it an agreement, by the way, yet in public. To that extent, if it opens a door to a proper political dialogue, because ultimately these are not the kinds of issues that either some soldiers or diplomats or bureaucrats can settle.
I don't think even the politicians in India today
but
can
the
settle.
Politicians need to decide how they want to handle it. I'm not saying solve it, because politics is a process, you know. Things evolve. They can mutate into benign or malign forms, and you can manage the issues. And in our case with China, we have such big fundamental issues, the economic issues, all these, that I think it's more a question of coming to some political understanding. That's what we did in Rajiv Gandhi's visit. It gave you 25 years of peace. To go your own way, each of you. Chinese made better use of those 25 years maybe than you, but you did better than anyone else in the world, except the Chinese. So to that extent, so I think you need to find a new modus vivendi somehow. Whether you can or not, I don't know. I'm not betting on it today.
No, if your defense minister makes a statement, I'm going to get Aksai Chin back, right? These are statements made by our leaders, right? And you make
he's
these
thinking
very
of 100,
aggressive
200
statements.
years.
You
But
are
if they followed it up, it would be a terrific statement. But they don't follow it up. That makes it be
No,
much
but we
worse.
don't have the economic. I'm sorry, Doc. I disagree. We don't have at present the economic strength to follow it up. What we need is
don't
that
agree.
economic strength.
I don't agree.
You don't.
You know, but I don't think it's not your GDP that deals with their GDP. Ultimately, as he said, it is how much power you can bring to bear on the actual problem. And the border problem is not a question of, oh, their GDP is 5 times bigger than you, or your population is bigger than theirs. These are frankly irrelevant. China fought the Korean War. When you look at their state of their economy, and they fought the Americans to a standstill in Korea.
No,
in
but what about
1953.
Vietnam? I mean, we have example of
Vietnam, they
yes.
refused to fight themselves.
Yes.
Look what the Vietnamese did.
Exactly.
You know.
That's the point I'm making. No, I was not talking GDP
No,
in that
so
sense.
for
What I was trying to say was, it is not militarily for you to take
You're
an
not-
aggressive
that's not
posture.
what
You're
you're
not going to.
trying.
It's in that sense that I was talking, right? But what you're saying is right. You should have the political maturity to take the opposition into confidence, take the people of India into confidence. And I said, only when we have peace on our borders can we get prosperity at home. So there has to be some give and some take. If you can build that kind of environment, that's the political maturity I think you're talking about.
You know, when we were negotiating the border peace and tranquility agreement with China in '92, Ashok knows, Narasimha Rao told me, you go and meet the following 6 people every month and talk to them about the agreement. And he mentioned Vajpayee, Advani, Gujral. He had a list of people all of them outside his cabinet and opposition leaders. So I told him, what do I tell them? I don't even have a draft, an agreement, nothing with the Chinese. We only have an agreement with the Chinese that we'll talk. He said, go and ask them what to do.
True.
So
That's wise.
I went and asked them, what should we do? So everyone said, what can we tell you, but, maybe. And we went through this. Every month I'd go. For 6 months I went around. And so each of them, and I'll say this for them, they spoke for the country, each of them. They never said, how does my party do out of this? They weren't party political. They each, I remember Vajpayee distinctly say, you think it's good for the country?
Do it.
And then if I said yes, he said, yeah, then do it. So, and for me, that was great learning because they were part of the process. Of course, I couldn't tell them all the details of the negotiation and so on. And Narasimha Rao also told me, don't tell them everything, being Narasimha Rao. But at the end of it, we had a national consensus behind what we were doing.
But that's what we need to build.
Actually, same thing I
very
can.
good.
I can.
That I agree.
He was there, he knows.
I was his director at that time, 93. 1996 military CBM's agreement. I was asked to negotiate. Once we had negotiated the package, Salman Haider was foreign secretary and asked me to go to CPM headquarters. My first visit to Ajay Bhavan, in fact, I was a little scared. So I was asked to go and brief opposition leaders before we had signed the agreement in confidence. And then no one sort of broke that confidence. Same thing happened in 2005. After we had negotiated agreement on political parameters and guiding principles for boundary settlement, which is a very sensitive agreement. I was told, go and brief Mr. Advani. He was leader of opposition. I briefed him. He heard me out. He didn't, make any comment, unlike Mr. Vajpayee. He kept his counsel. But no one opposed either of the two agreements because they were seen to be in furtherance of national interest.
Absolutely.
So need to ensure that some of these issues go beyond, partisan politics is very important. Otherwise, we can't deal with a country like China.
I've always believed that while public figures, heads of political parties will spar at each other in the public space, when it comes to the national interest, each one of them
that
is
has been our
patriotic
experience.
enough to go along.
Exactly.
It's the maturity of the leader of the country who has to take everybody into confidence and then evolve a solution, which is the only way forward. What do you say, Doctor?
I agree, totally agree with you that nobody wants to stick his neck out to fight when everybody else will be suffering for that. But there's no initiative being taken.
That's the problem.
Even within our own party, there's no initiative is
See, the
taken.
problem is that these are unilateral decisions being taken
Yes.
without taking people into confidence.
That's right.
And that creates a lot of misgivings in the
Yes.
political system.
And most
the
of
trouble
the
is that the other side, I mean, not just China, but anybody else, if they see politics in India as a blood sport,
Yeah.
they're very happy to
That's
use
true.
this.
That's
yeah.
And the chances of your actually negotiating successfully go down tremendously. If you look weak and divided.
Yep.
And
But then
that's the problem.
the leader has a responsibility to
Yes.
show that we are all united
Yes.
by calling everybody.
Yeah,
and
but if the leader says, "Oh, nothing has happened,"
yeah.
and everything is "Na koi is taraf aaya, na
Yeah.
koi is taraf," so then how do you sort of evolve a consensus? No way.
Dr. Swamy referred to Sumdurongchu Valley, Wangtung incident.
Yes.
Before difficulties we had over eastern Ladakh, that was the last time when India-China borders became live. And in fact, Deng Xiaoping conveyed through Caspar Weinberger that we'll teach India a lesson. But almost from day one, we maintained complete transparency. MEA spokesperson briefed media that there has been transgression by China. They have occupied this post in Wangtung in Sumdurongchu Valley. On the whole, actually maintaining that kind of visibility, sharing information with other political parties, with public, in fact, it helps negotiators.
always.
So there are, of course, details, negotiating positions you can't make public. That goes without saying. But a general, stance of greater visibility about the outcomes as also about problem is most helpful.
Well, I think this discussion, ultimately, there are three issues that really come to light. Number one, we are economically dependent on the Chinese in many senses, as you rightly put it. And our economic relationship is, of course, very, very robust. Secondly, we're not militarily as strong as China is at the moment, right? We can be.
But we have enough.
But we have enough. We have
we
enough
can
to deter them
Yeah.
to take any real aggressive posture. So
We
that's clear, that they know. But having said all that, we need to politically resolve it. And the only way to resolve it is to be inclusive in your policies, take everybody into confidence, and tell the people of this country we need to resolve the border issue, because then we can actually work as friends and take the economic agenda forward. I think that's
I would
Mr.
like to
Balifa,
add this
yeah.
much,
yes.
that we are not as dependent on China as it is made out today in the country.
Okay.
And in fact, if you decide that you need to
But then
undo,
you have to move to the Americans and to the
well,
West.
if you are buying from the Americans, is as good as buying from the Chinese, or vice versa. And if the Americans knew that we are trying to get out of the Chinese clutches on us, I'm sure they will be a little more reasonable than they are presently are.
Here on economic engagement, Sibal, I think it's a fairly complex picture we have. On trade account, if you look at intra-set data, because India, China, we come up with different sets of data. So I look at international trade center data, intra-set data. Last year, trade deficit was $106 billion. Our total exports was $16 billion, which was a decline from $21 billion, or $23 billion in 2021. And it's not likely to pick up momentum. We have all struggled with trying to remove non-tariff barriers without much success. So trade will remain highly asymmetric to our disadvantage, which is
no
not
doubt
viable.
about that, yes.
More importantly, we have developed dependencies on China in areas which is most unhealthy, and it affects our economic security. And it's already, in fact, just to give you two examples, we buy tunnel boring machine from China. Once we started making some headway in terms of tunneling in border areas, they've stopped selling those machines to us.
But the Scandinavian countries have great
No, but they are
technology.
the cheapest. They were the most.
that's the problem.
Then but another area where they have monopoly, we want to green energy. We want to develop our own ecosystem. we have done relatively well when it comes to solar panels and solar modules.
Yeah.
But we want to move up to ingots and wafers. 95% of machinery for fabricating that is with China, and they've stopped selling to us. So, getting into this kind of situation is not
I
advisable
agree
at all.
with you, I agree.
API, refer to API, 85% of requirement to APIs comes from China for a country which styles itself as the pharmacy of the world.
This is the problem, Doc. This is the problem, that we are dependent in these areas.
I mean, we must work to see that.
No, I agree.
goes.
You have to de-risk. You have to.
We have to
Yeah.
de-risk.
Yeah.
So
You have to
de-risking
find
is
other ways.
essential.
Yes,
There are
right,
other ways.
right.
Find resilience, build other supply chains. You have to work at this.
Right.
And there
Can
are
be done.
opportunities because there is a whole degree of discomfort about the way China is dominating our global value chains and the way they want to dominate the future industries. Because that will lead to
The
retarded
American
industrialization
concern is the
world
same as our
over.
concern.
But we're
Yes.
not the only ones with this problem, and it's
exactly.
not
The
only
Americans
America.
too.
Japan,
Yes.
Korea.
You're right.
You look around
So
you.
what Doc is saying is, let's
So he's
collaborate
right.
at the other end.
Yes.
That's what you're saying.
At least they are democracies.
I hope these guys listen to this program. They might have pearls of wisdom to sort of include it in their policy making, and talk to people instead
At least
of
they can call
making
you
these
and
statements.
discuss with you.
But thank you very much. This has been an enormously wonderful discussion. Thanks, Ambassador Kantha. Thanks, Shiv Shankar.
Thank you.
And thank you, Doc. You've always been great. All of you great.
Thanks to you that you hold something like
Thank
this.
you.